Welcome to another episode of Metal Mastermind. Today, we're going to talk about how to make your guitars and overall rhythm section sound amazing in the mix. This is what it's all about. Because when we get to the mix, things need to sound right. After all, that's what everybody's going to hear, isn't it? So, that's the question of the day. How do we get awesome sounding rhythm sections to happen in our guitars, in our basses, in our drums, and all together as a cohesive piece? Well, there's a couple things we need to keep in mind. Please refer back to our video of the golden rules of recording. Those are going to be integral because you'll see that as we get closer to the mix stage, the recording stage plays a pivotal role in how that all turns out. So Jason, I got a question for you, brother. Are you ready to record some guitars?
Yeah, dude, I'm kind of in the mood to record some guitars. Let's do it.
Now, a lot of production nowadays happens virtually. This is something that we see in every industry at this point. Of course, due to the pandemic. But we've always had the ability to send files, well, I shouldn't say always, because definitely people in the Renaissance did not have that ability, but we have abilities to send files over the internet and communicate with others via online. Now, this is very important to remember because when we are collaborating with others, it's going to be difficult to backtrack on certain things if we don't have the files that we need in the right format, in the right recording environment, in the right tone, right? So the first thing we have to remember is that, as stated before, when we're talking about the golden rules, make sure you've got the right tone, the right amp, the right guitar, you've got your levels right, you've got the mic placement right, you've got the mic choice right, okay? A whole bunch of things are going to play into a factor of this. So, when you're going to go into recording your album, you have to make sure you are following these golden rules. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let me ask you this, Jason. What's your weapon of choice? And how are we using it?
The amp we're using here is the EVH 5153 with the EL34 tubes and the matching 212 cabinet. We're just micing this up with a good old Shure SM57 mic, but we're gonna use a couple different mic positions as we do this test here.
Another note, trial and error is the key to success here. We need to be able to separate the mentality of being a musician from being that of an engineer. What's the difference, you ask? Well, here's the thing. When you are working on your mix, do you usually listen to the music that you're creating, or do you listen to how it actually sounds? This is what I'm talking about. When we are listening as musicians, we almost ignore a lot of the facts of physics and science and all this type of stuff because we're so focused on the emotional quality of the music. But when we're listening as a sound engineer, we are listening to the finesse of how music, quote unquote, tickles our ear. This is an important distinction because it's going to make or break how you proceed. You must always mix with intention. And by mixing with intention, we are deliberately choosing what's going to be in one place or another and making sure how we marry two different types of sounds to prevent things like masking, which is frequencies that share the same band, and how one will be heard over another. That's just one of many sound issues that we all come across. All right, Jason, so let's lock and load. What are we going to do first?
Now we're going to record two rhythm guitar tracks, and for this first track, I'm going to place the mic towards the outer edge of the speaker away from the cone.
Nice job, brother. This is a perfect example of Jason using the first part of the golden rule. We need a good performance. All right, so how are we going to approach the second part of this challenge?
For the second rhythm guitar track, I'm gonna move the mic over towards the center of the comb and move it back just a little bit from the grill. Now the reason why we're doing this, using a slightly different tone for that second guitar track, is having that subtle variance is gonna be what makes your guitar tracks come to life, and it's just gonna help so much in the full mix. So that's a little recording tip for you.
Nice! That was sick, bro! Anybody catch that harmony that he put in there? Pretty awesome. Okay, so let's go into Pro Tools, enter the Forge, and make Jason's guitars even deadlier.
All right, guys, welcome to Pro Tools. Here, we're gonna take a look at Jason's reference track, which is basically Jason's idea of how he wants this track to sound. Now, coming from a guitarist, I'm expecting one thing: pretty loud guitars. But here we go. Let's take a listen. We've got Jason's reference track. It's a great thing to have so that I know as an engineer where I'm going to take it, right? So this is Jason's idea. What I love about this mix is there's a clear indication of where the heaviness needs to lie. And I can tell that it's with the guitars. Of course, Jason's the guitarist. We all have our biases. I'm a drummer. I love to put a little bit more drums in my mix, right? So one of the things that I love about this mix is that, but I noticed a couple things. There's a little bit of mud between the mids and the sides. So we're going to have to work on making sure that when we put those elements in the mix, they sing really well and mesh really well with each other. One of the really important things about a mix is creating what we call pockets in your mix. So we're gonna do that, and you're gonna see an example of what that means. Okay, so we're gonna take that mix right here, and I've already pre-mixed this stuff for you guys so you can take a listen to what it's gonna sound like. This is the final product. All right, now the goal of this video is to create awesome rhythm guitars. So there's going to always be a little bit of more rhythm guitar in this mix just for that purpose, okay? Just to show you guys what we're doing. Now, Jason had a lot of awesome points when talking about recording guitars, and I'm going to show you what it's like to actually mix this stuff.
Now, as you can see, Ken is using some pretty prestigious plugins here for the post-production of these guitar tracks. But what if you don't have access to these higher-end plugins? Can you use the plugins that's in your DAW?
You make a great point here, Jason. Why don't I show you, and let's dive back into the DAW, and let's compare premium and stock plugins together.
So in Pro Tools, I've got two different types of mixes here. One I've done with a premium plugin set, and another with stock mix plugin sets. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what it will sound like with stock plugins, and then I'm gonna dive in deeper on how we can do those things. Rad. So I will say this, having premium plugins is a really nice thing because it just makes going things faster. Having to do it with stock plugins, you can do it, but it will make things just a little slower. So let's go ahead and take a look into how this all breaks down, okay? When looking at just this kind of stuff, I'm just gonna use the stock plugins for an example. So here we have, this is my sort of suite that I've got going on with my stock plugins. Let's go ahead and take a look at what I got with my premium set. Now, I must say, when I was mixing this, it didn't take me very long to mix the actual track, but it took me a lot longer just to try and match with stock plugins to the premium stuff. I can't tell you, man, it was really, really tough. But you know, that's kind of to be expected when you're working on this kind of stuff, right? So that's what having premium plugins is good for. It speeds up your workflow. We want to get an awesome rhythm mix, but right, I want to address something. When we say a rhythm mix, we're not just talking about guitars. We've got to include how guitars mesh with the rest of the rhythm section, right? So guitar rhythms are a very unique breed. They're not like leads. You don't take the same settings that you put on your rhythm and put it on your lead. You probably already know this just through performing, right? When you get to a lead, a solo, right, you want to have that stand out. And that's the same thing that we're doing here. We want to make our rhythm section mesh like a whole. Whereas the lead, if there were any leads on this track, that would be something that would stand out and take the spotlight. So here we have with our guitar track, I've got on both of these using with different settings. Let me just pull those up. I've got the compressors. These are also Neve compressors. I love Neve, and Neve has also been very legendary for rock and metal music. These two Neve compressors, they've got a little bit of compression on the top of the guitars, and their automatic gain recovery helps to sort of keep them at the same volume that they came in at. So what we're doing is we're getting a little bit more fatness out of it, but without adding too much gain reduction, because the guitars, they're already very, very, sausage-like. And we've got this compressor just not to limit the dynamic range so much, but just to add a little bit more fullness. That's all they're doing here. But what we've got over here, which is what I love about the SPL harmonic twin tube processor, is that we are elevating the saturation and the harmonics individually on these tracks differently. Now with this plugin, you can see over here, there are two knobs, and in between the two knobs, we've got two parts that say harmonics, and there's two buttons that you can select. And depending on the selection that you create, you can prioritize those harmonics that we're looking at. So that's what I've got going on here, and I've got on the left channel, I believe this is this one, we've prioritized 3 kilohertz, okay, because that left guitar is our outer, okay, our outer microphone position, and then on the right, I've got it prioritizing 6 kilohertz. Okay, and that's the center. So both of those are having their own timbral colors, and I'm emphasizing what those two microphones are doing. So when you listen to the two, there are a lot more, it's a lot more obvious to hear that there's two different tones coming out of the guitar. So let's go ahead and take a listen to that. Okay, so I love this plugin because it already gives me the sound that I need. I don't need to go into doing all this EQ and all this kind of crap. So check this out, right? Now, if I didn't have this harmonic saturator, I'd have to go in and work with EQ. Let's just take a listen to the right-hand side of this guitar, and you're gonna see exactly what I mean, right? So this is it without the stock plugins. We're using the premium plugins here. There's this real nice crunch that I'm getting, right? If I bypass that, this is what the original guitar sounded like. So you should probably just be hearing that on your right side. If I do the two of them, right, without that effect, here's the two guitars just on its own. Right, they've got this deep thickness to it, but I want that deepness to be in the bass mostly. So what I'm gonna do is have just these two prioritize that edginess, and this is what comes out of that. Right? But now it's really hard to achieve that using stock plugins. This is what I had to do. So I had the first initial compressor happening, but then I had to engage these two types of EQs, and I had to stack these EQs just to emulate what that harmonic saturation was doing, right? So if we're just taking a listen to that right guitar for a second, and then if I just compare that with the other, I got pretty close. I was pretty proud to get close enough to say there's not a lot of difference, except that crunch that I'm getting from the saturator, which I could not do with just the EQ. Take a listen one more time. And then here's the stock. Right? So tonally it sounds similar, but that crunch that we're getting with that saturator isn't able to come through here. So at the end of the day, with the stock plugins, it sounds a little cleaner, which could be a thing that you want. But for me, I wanted that aggression, right? So I've got this information bussed into a guitar master track, which was the trickiest part of this entire mix for me, honestly. Also with the bass. I mean, it was just like, the drums were the easiest thing. When it got to the guitars, it was like, oh crap. So here we have one of my favorite compressors ever. The Shadow Hills Industries, compressor here, mastering compressor. This thing is a beast, okay? This Class A mastering compressor is a beast. It's got two different types of compressors in one. It's got an optical and a discrete transistor compressor here. So we've got this information. I can select the different types of metals to use. Oh my God, it's so versatile. But listen to what this guy does, right? And then when I take it away, it's so disappointing. Here's without it. Just more fullness out of this compressor. Now, if I were to try and emulate that using all this stuff, look what I had to do. I had to go in and bring in an optical compressor separately. It's not within that plugin. I had to bring in a discrete compressor separately. It's within that plugin also. And then I had to also tonally shape these compressors to emulate what this compressor already does. So I have two different types of compressors just on the discrete side, just to shape it, and with the EQ. And then at the end of that, I had to also shape it out of the compressor into my Chris Lord Algae Guitars plugin. I'm telling you, man, it's possible to totally mix with stock plugins. It just takes longer, though. It really does. But what's the benefit, right? I know I'm kind of like slamming on these, stock plugins a little bit. The real benefit to having stock plugins is it doesn't matter where you go, right? If you're traveling, if you're going from studio to studio, or you're exchanging, like Jason is exchanging his stuff to me, well, I can just take the Pro Tools file, send it to somebody, and they can just work with what I had without having to say, hey, I don't have this plugin, or I don't have that plugin, or I don't have this plugin, right? So the benefit of having stock plugins is it's transferable and it's also free, right? So what's the challenge, right? Trying to emulate this kind of stuff. How do you start to do that? Well, you need to listen. You need to compare. And one of the things that I suggest you do is take a reference track that you're trying to emulate and try to get as close to what their sound is as much as possible. It's a little challenging, but one of the things that you can do is take a filter and sweep the entire tune that you're listening to and see where are the frequencies for certain instruments becoming relevant, or prevalent, I should say, right? So use that and play with it. It's a great experiment. I highly encourage it. When I'm teaching other students, I always tell them to do that. It's a great exercise to learn more about mixing and what frequency ranges certain instruments lie in. Okay, so now we've got all of this going on, but the last thing that I've got here is this vitalizer. Now, this vitalizer is another thing that adds some saturation, because you guys know I love saturation. And what I've got here is a little bit of some processing in the mid-high frequency area, right? So we've got some intensity elevated at around 6K, but then we've got also 1.1 kilohertz emphasized there as well. And at the end of all of that, we've got a stereo expander. So what does that mean? It's going to take the two different guitars and it's just going to make them go a little bit wider so that we have more information in the middle for our bass and drums. See what I'm doing? So this is really, really cool. And you can do this with a stock plugin like the stereo width tool that comes with Pro Tools. So let's go ahead and take a listen to before and after when we're listening to premium versus stock, right? So this is the premium guitar chain at the moment. And here's what we did with the stock plugins. Not bad. Different, but not bad. It was as close as I could get when I was trying to mix with all of these comparisons. It's a tough thing to do. I will not lie. So let's go ahead and recap what we've just done. So now I've got the guitars dominating the mid-range in this tune. I've taken out much of that low mid so that the bass could really take a hold of that area, but not enough to completely eliminate it out of the guitars. I still want that richness that's in the low mids. I just don't want it to collide as much, right? Okay, so let's listen to the track before and after, right, with premium plugins and stock plugins. Here we go. So here's the premium mix. And here is our stock mix. All right, guys. Hope that was an awesome explanation for you. By the way, if you're a fan of, getting into some Pro Tools, like premium plugins, not even just Pro Tools, it can be in Logic, it could be in Nuendo, it could be in Cubase, whatever you use. Some of the ones that I really highly recommend, the Universal Audio suite for the Neves, compressors, as well as their EQs and their channel strips are amazing. SPL from Plugin Alliance is killer. This stuff I use on almost every mix. All right, just wanted to throw that out there. Oh, and don't forget to check out that Chris Lord Algae stuff. Really, really top-notch stuff.
That's all for today, folks. If this video was helpful to you, make sure you like and subscribe to Metal Mastermind. We're going to be putting out more content, and we've got awesome new content coming out later this year that you're all going to love. All of this information that we're sharing with you can be found in part in our Ultimate Home Studio Guide, which is going to actually prepare you how to make those mixes rock in building your own home studio. It's a free guide. Make sure you go to metalmastermind.com/join and get that free guide now. You don't want to miss out, because the more you know, the more you have power. And that power is going to come in the form of awesome freaking mixes. So, Are you ready? We'll see you next time on the next episode of Metal Mastermind. Take care.